How's everyone doing? Hopefully everybody enjoyed UFC 249. I think to many, not only the event in terms of how it ran and the safety of the fighters and everything like that turned out to be successful, and at least in my opinion, even with the situation and Jacare Souza being diagnosed, I think they did a pretty good job of maintaining that. I don't want to touch too much into the first topic, which is corporate greed and the UFC and the review of this event. There was a lot of negativity heading into this UFC 249 event, followed by the other fight nights, one which is occurring tomorrow on Wednesday, and the other fight night which will be occurring this Saturday. Many have this kind of false impression that this attempt by Dana White to get everything back and going during what's happening right now is just purely out of money and him wanting to be the best promoter, the best commissioner, which is basically what Dana White is if you're comparing him to the Adam Silvers of the NBA and the Roger Goodells of the NFL, that he wants to be the best. So there's two takeaways here. One is that I truly do not believe that Dana White is doing this for the benefit of his own pocket. In fact, he's probably losing some money in terms of setting up Fight Island and going out of all the trouble of booking venues 3 weeks before the fight was supposed to happen on May 9th, when the first occurrence of Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson was going to happen, and originally Khabib and Tony. So let's dial it back a little bit in terms of that, because I think that's completely unfair assessment. These events are going on. The UFC reportedly hasn't laid off one single employee, which is something that not many other leagues and many other companies in the United States and frankly around the world are able to say. So I wouldn't say that. Now, is Dana White setting these events up to put himself in the limelight? I can't disagree with that. I mean, Dana White is always somebody that's trying to make an impression and do things. So do I think he's trying to keep his company alive? 100%, obviously. Is he trying to benefit his employees and keep them with jobs? 100%. And if the negativity that comes out of that is just him, pushing to get these events done and trying to move through what's going on right now to make him seem like he's the savior, if that's the cost of him doing all those other things, that's fine with me, because there's still more positive coming out of it than negative. And it's not corporate greed. It might be his individual, I don't even want to call it greed, but his individual motivation or dedication to having these things go back on. And by doing that, it might make him look like it's all because of him. It's all for his reputation. Even though I still do think he's obviously trying to benefit himself, and he wants to be the first guy to get sports back on, and that might not be the best thing to have in mind when you're trying to look after the safety of the fighters and the safety of the event itself and his employees. That might not be the best thing to have in mind, but there's still a positive outcome that's coming out of this, which is that it's not like he's forcing the fighters to fight. The ones that, at least the majority of them that were on this card, they really wanted to fight. They wanted to get their paycheck. They not only wanted to get their paycheck, they wanted to show and perform for other people. So for the fans, for other fighters in the division to take notice of, I'm that guy. And this is moving into my second topic, which is there not being any crowd. And I was just watching Bryce Mitchell, who is probably the second or third most outstanding performer on this card who had the most dominant performance, but I think Justin Gaethje and Ngannou take kind of that 1 and 2 spot. But he's right behind in terms of taking the MMA world by storm. He had a dominating victory over Charles Rosa, and in my prediction I had him winning, but he's fighting Charles Rosa, a black belt. I forget where he did achieve his black belt from, but apparently it's a very reputable gym according to Joe Rogan, and Charles Rosa didn't win the fight. He didn't really come too close to winning the fight. I want to say he had 2 10-8 rounds and one 10-9 round against him, in which Bryce Mitchell won. But Bryce Mitchell almost had 2 successful twisters in that fight, and like I said, he's one of 2 people to ever do it before that with the Korean Zombie. So, some people are saying let's rename the twister Thug Nasty. That's just how amazing it is to see him do that in the fight. But not just that, his takedowns were flawless. I mean, he was constantly sweeping legs, and it's just flawless to watch what he was able to do, be so dominant on the ground. He talked about not wanting to go for arm bars to leave his body exposed for Charles Rosa to do something in return. But Bryce Mitchell did speak about the fans, and that he actually preferred not having fans there. And some of the fighters spoke about this. Carla Esparza was another one who said Daniel Cormier commentating helped me out a little bit within his advice and just trying to be one. She was saying that she was being a little bit one dynamic in the fight, trying to go for takedowns, and he was kind of saying to mix it up a little bit more and try to also her in terms of her wrestling and her grappling, try to switch it up a little bit in some of her takedowns, and so that clearly benefited her. There were other fighters like Greg Hardy said he took some advice from Daniel Cormier in his fight, so I found that kind of interesting that Bryce Mitchell was kind of one of these guys that really benefited and kind of erred towards the side of, yes, I obviously want to have the fans there, but it was more helpful in terms of I was able to hear what the other coaches, Charles Rosa's coaches, were saying and kind of, that they were struggling and panicking. That gave him relief, and that helped him in terms of, what he wanted to do in the fight. So I think that's quite exciting. I am enjoying it, and somebody that's still learning the sport, learning different moves and different things that the coaches are calling out now. Some of the coaches usually use code in terms of if they want their fighter to throw a combination, if they want their fighter to go for a takedown, for instance, what kind of submission they're going to go for, if they're going to go for, a rear naked choke, triangle choke, if they're going to go for a Darce choke, they might have a different combination for that. So I think that was kind of interesting, at least for some of the hardcore fans, to kind of, pick up on some of those things that were being said. So interesting that a lot of the fighters really enjoyed not having a lot of noise, being able to observe kind of what the other coaches were saying and more of what their coaches were saying without being distracted by the fans. Dominic Cruz also spoke about this with Ariel Helwani, saying that having no fans there was a little bit different, as usually you have the guys, the fans that are saying, you suck, and the other fans that are cheering you on. It's a little bit of emotions that might kind of raise your adrenaline and make you a little bit more on your toes and kind of more aware of the situation and just thinking about beating the opponent. So I found that kind of interesting. And the third takeaway, the last takeaway that I have from UFC 249 is this event put 2 divisions really on notice. And I could make an argument potentially for 3, and that being Bryce Mitchell is now a guy at 145 pounds. aside from whether we're going to see what kind of striking he's able to offer when he faces tougher competitors, that his grappling is among the best at 145 in the featherweight division. And it'll be interesting to see if he's now going to get a top 7 or 8 contender. Is he going to see a Jeremy Stevens, a Calvin Kattar, 2 guys who just fought? Maybe even see somebody that's higher ranked. Is he going to see maybe a Yair Rodriguez? Is he going to see maybe a guy like Zabit who's obviously can grapple pretty well? So I think that would be an interesting matchup. But again, Zabit's a guy who's going for the title. So is there going to be a guy at the 145 division that is going to be perfect in terms of his grappling, his striking? There's one guy that I would see if he does want to fight at 145, and he has before. I don't know if he has been fighting at 155 recently. I want to say he's still at 145 because he recently fought Jeremy Stevens, and that man is Anato Moicano, a very good BJJ artist, and also got some good stand-up game. That would be a little bit of an interesting fight to see who would win that battle on the ground, and kind of a next step for Bryce Mitchell to really get into that conversation of the Zabits and the Yair Rodriguez and the Korean Zombies that are up there challenging for the title. So I think Moicano would be a good bridge fight for him. But anyways, moving on from that division, that's seen a little bit turn. The 2 main divisions that I do see being very, very strongly affected are the 155 division and heavyweight division. With Francis Ngannou now winning that fight, in my opinion, he's the number 1 contender. And I say that as to no disrespect to Daniel Cormier, but I think if they're going to fight, Ngannou would win. He's younger, he's sharper, he's been training more. I think the advantage would be to Ngannou, but I think you still kind of have to let DC and Stipe finish that trilogy fight, because frankly, the guy who loses that fight might even retire. And then it'll be Ngannou next, which is why I think that it probably would have made more sense to make this fight for the interim belt. But then it's like you have Curtis Razor Blades, who's in the heavyweight division, who's among the best. He's got great wrestling. He's got great striking. He's got a very tough chin. I want to say he lost to Ngannou, so he's looking to get another fight with Ngannou. And if Blades it's Blades, Rosenstruck. Those are the 2 guys that are kind of round out the top 5. So if he's able to beat Blades and he just beat Jairzinho Rosenstruck, there's nothing really left else for him other than Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic, who's holding the belt at heavyweight. So interesting to see what's going to go on there, because I don't think we're going to see Stipe and DC at least until September, October. So there's still a little bit of time until that fight unfolds, and I'm definitely not criticizing Stipe, as I think he's obviously doing the right thing in his duties back home in Ohio, working with the fire department and acting as a first responder. So I'm definitely not going to hop on Daniel Cormier's back, and even now Curtis Razor Blades, who's kind of criticizing, Stipe for, kind of taking advantage of what's going on right now and taking that back seat. But this is something that's going to play out. It's something that I have many different opinions on, and so does the MMA community. And it's hard to argue against Ngannou not getting the next title shot. But again, he hasn't accomplished what DC's accomplished in the UFC. So I'm just going to leave that one kind of open for some more debate if you guys have any more comments. But obviously the 155 division is the other one that I wanted to talk about. Complete pandemonium. Tony Ferguson's supposed to fight Khabib. That doesn't happen. Then, Justin Gaethje and Tony are supposed to fight. Now that fight gets delayed 3 weeks later. It does finally happen, but it would have been better if Tony had won. And the reason why I say this is not because I'm a very big Tony fan. I'm also an extremely big Justin Gaethje fan. Those are probably my 2 favorite guys at 155, and I'm a fan of them really equally in their skill. So the reason why I say it would have been easier is because, again, Tony is the most deserving man at 155 to face Khabib. I don't think anybody can argue that up until this fight, obviously, and Justin winning. He has basically just dominated the division other than, fighting Khabib. And when he signed up for this fight against Justin, again, he still went through this weight cut because the date got moved back, and some question whether that affected him. I think it's pretty obvious that that would have an effect on literally any fighter, but who knows? Tony Ferguson isn't human. So what does this mean for the 155 division? Well, now Justin is going to fight Khabib, and this is going to be Khabib's toughest test by a mile. And I'm not saying Poirier is not a good wrestler. I mean, is he as good of a wrestler as Justin Gaethje? Does he have Justin Gaethje's wrestling background? Probably not. I don't think he really does. Justin Gaethje was a D1 wrestler, and I think at least we saw in that fight with Tony. Tony is a good wrestler. He has a wrestling background as well in college. He has a football background, so he knows he knows takedowns pretty well, and he studied them pretty well. His work on the ground is very good, and I think had he had found Justin Gaethje on the ground, we could be talking about a whole different fight. And he's a very good striker, not only because of his chin and the ability of him being able to stay in fights, but I mean, he's got great power too. We're talking about the second round, and him and Justin Gaethje hits Justin Gaethje with a clean uppercut. Who knows what's going to happen after that if the bell's not there, right? So, and I don't want to be that kind of person to play hypothetical situations, but Tony was very much in that fight, and the people that say, Tony sucked in that fight, well, I think me, Joe Rogan, and many other of people in the MMA community would strongly disagree, and I'm not saying I'm at Joe Rogan's standard of knowledge of fighting, as I'm certainly not, but there are a lot of people in the community that believe that he's still one of the best fighters in that division. So if Justin and Khabib are going to fight, I've never thought Khabib was going to lose, and this is a very probable situation for Khabib to lose. He's going up against a great wrestler. We saw Tony trying to find that range, get in, try and go for a two-leg takedown, try and land a little punch, just to feel that range on the thigh of Justin Gaethje, just in the lower body. He was not able to find that range. That just shows how difficult this fight was. He was also training for a completely different fight with Khabib, which was going to be pretty much a pure grappling match, where I think many people saw this just being a stand-up brawl, which is exactly what it was. As Justin Gaethje's not much of an offensive wrestler in the UFC, he's generally very defensive, and he likes to keep the fight standing, as he's got some of the most power at 155, and that's pretty much not being able to be argued by anybody else. So with those two guys fighting, and I think Justin has a pretty good shot at beating Khabib. I don't know what's going to happen there. As I've said, Khabib has never faced a wrestler, and quite frankly, such a dominant striker other than Conor McGregor. And now this leaves Conor McGregor in the dust, and Conor McGregor coming out and saying, oh, well, now I need to get that title shot. Now I need to fight Justin Gaethje. Whether that would be for the interim belt, I don't know. All I know is that Justin needs to be fighting Khabib next, and that Conor now has to wait in line. Now, Tony fractured his orbital bone. I don't know how much time it's going to take him to recover from that kind of an injury. I know it's usually about a month to 2 months, at least what I've been reading. I could be wrong about that. I don't know how serious the extent of his injury is, but I would anticipate that kind of being a recovery time. Now, we know, again, he recovered from a torn ACL in 6 months and didn't even go to a proper rehab facility and doing his own rehab, so who knows when that guy's going to come back. But should he come back in good time, say August or September, that for me, they need to book Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor, and that needs to happen. Because if I'm Dana White, I should know that Conor McGregor at 170, he's not going to, destroy Kamaru Usman. He's not going to go in there and destroy Jorge Masvidal. Conor McGregor is not big at that division, especially against a guy like Usman. Now, even against a guy like Jorge, who is still a little bit bigger than Conor McGregor, that's a similar comparison. But Conor has never, fought a strong, successful 170 fighter in their prime. I don't think Cowboy Cerrone's in his prime, and I certainly don't think he's a big 170 fighter, as he's typically fighting at 155 as well, and has fought better in 155. I don't think he was ready for that McGregor fight, but McGregor is still got good takedown defense. he's one of the best strikers in the MMA. I don't think too many in the MMA and in the UFC. I don't think too many people are going to argue that. So I want to see Conor and I want to see Tony, because Conor needs a test that's going to put him back into a title fight that he actually has a legit chance. Conor was not in top shape going into his fight with Khabib. He said he was drinking, he said he wasn't training as much, and you just can't do that against a guy like Khabib. Khabib is one of the best fighters on planet Earth, period. He's one of the best wrestlers and grapplers on planet Earth, period. He just is. He's just that good. And if Conor is now saying he hasn't been in the gym, he didn't really want to take fights before his health concerns. I don't know what kind of shape he is, but if he's not in top shape, he's not beating Khabib in my mind. And, some people now think Tony's fallen off and that Tony's not legit. And for those people that think that, well, what more perfect test than Tony Ferguson is? I don't think Dustin Poirier is going to go in there and beat Conor McGregor, and I don't think Dustin Poirier is better than Tony Ferguson. I think he's right behind those guys, and he's still kind of a top 5 or 6 guy, and that's not saying any disrespect to him. Hopefully he proves me wrong, but I just see Tony being too difficult of a challenge for Conor McGregor. If they were to fight, Tony is superior on the ground by a mile in terms of his BJJ and his training with Eddie Bravo. I just think Conor is not a match for him on the ground. In terms of their wrestling, I think Tony's a better wrestler, but Conor's going to be able to, maybe stuff some of those takedowns. I don't really know what's going to happen there on the feet. There might not be a tougher man on the planet than Tony Ferguson. He could have been knocked out 10 times in that fight, and Justin Gaethje was just throwing bombs after bombs after bombs. And that last, in the 5th round with 2 or 3 minutes left in that round, Justin just throws a bomb, and Tony's just shaking his head as, he's just doesn't know how to feel. At that point, when you're just getting pounded like that, you don't know, what the heck is going on, and he's trying to keep himself in that fight. And Herb Dean stepped in and done the right thing. Chuck Liddell disagreed with that stoppage and made that vocal to Dana White.